Hello everyone, welcome back. It's been a while since I uploaded a video. I hope everyone's doing well. So today we're going to talk about these GT Power Series cranks and the reproduction versions and the originals. So a lot of the people are buying them, the repops, and using them on their builds, which is good, and the originals. But there's some confusion between the cranks and how different and similar they are in which ways. And so we're gonna kind of shed some light on all this today. So basically, the original GT Power Series cranks, which are sitting in front of you, were produced by SR from 1986 to about 1990, and they were all made in Japan. There were 3 different sizes of these lengthwise. 150 millimeter, 175 millimeter, and 180 millimeter. And they were all forged 70-50 aluminum. So they're pretty strong, durable. Finish on them was like a kind of a satin to like a dull or a medium polish. I got a few Survivor sets that are medium polished, but I've seen them in satin as well. So that's debatable. You guys can argue about that in the comments. It's up to you. But anyway, these were basically made for the team models for either the Pro Series or the Pro Freestyle Tours. And they are unique because they are only right-hand drive. And you'll see that there's a non-removable sprocket drive bolt that is in the one arm. You see the other side, there is no provision for that. And please, people, I don't know why everyone does this, but you try to remove this bolt. Don't do that. It's not necessary. It shouldn't be removed, and you will damage it trying to get it out. It is Loctited in, and it's basically meant to be there forever. So leave it alone. Don't touch it. Okay, so these cranks were basically all pretty much the same. They were produced through the various years. You can see that there's the year, which is stamped in there, and the month code, which could be various different letters. And these also have the screen printed logos, which say GT Power Series. These are threaded right into the crank, these for the pedals. There is not an insert there, so these are just right into the aluminum. There are 9/16 on all of them. There are 4 pinch bolts, which are standard head, metric. And there are 2 spindle bolts. And these are mild steel, chrome plated. The original pinch bolts were also chrome plated. Now, those look very much like these, which are the new versions. Now, there is a Generation 1 and a Generation 2 GT Power Series crank. The Generation 1 was produced from 2014 to 2016. They're made by Dorel, which owns GT. And they're very similar to the Primo Hollow Bites or the Eastern cranks. The country of origin is Taiwan, so a little bit different from the originals from Japan. These are also forged 70-50 aluminum alloy. They are not stamped on the arms with the year and any of that. They do. Some of the older ones have a production stamp on them. One thing you will notice right away about these is they are very different from the OG Power Series arms. So there's no mistaking them. So this hole here is threaded on both the left hand and right hand. They're driven, theoretically, both sides if you wish to do that. So that's the easiest way to tell if you have original or you have the reproduction ones. The other thing that makes it stand out real quick, there are steel inserts in all of the new reproduction cranks, and those are to prevent stripping of the pedals and ripping the threads out. Now, on the new ones, they do use 4 pinch bolts, but they are different. The diameter of the head is much smaller on the new versions than on the old versions. So remember that. The GT Power Series logo is laser etched. They could be in black or white, depending on whatever they decided and which bike they were going on. They are 9/16 threads on both of these, so they share the same pedals. So let's talk about major differences now. Since we have some of the similarities in front of us, the spindles. So this is the new spindle. It is hollow. It is made out of chromoly. It is 22 millimeter in diameter. And then we have the SR spindle, which is completely different. It is threaded for the OD, and it basically has two different size threads. One's larger, one's smaller, so you can fit the parts over it and to engage the bearings. This spindle is also hollow. It is chromoly, and it is heat treated. Most of them are stamped SR. They should be stamped SR. And the squares are different. So the ends of these spindles are completely different size. On the originals, the flat to flat is 16 millimeter. So that would be this area here. And on the new one, it is much larger at 19 millimeter. So this is way bigger. The way this stuff works is completely different. The new Reproduction cranks are much easier to install. They're much easier to basically maintain and keep them running. And so here's a spindle bolt from the new one. This happens to be titanium. It is not the material that comes with the ones you buy. This is an upgraded bolt. But these usually come steel, and they'll come either silver or black. So the 2014 to 2016 cranks usually came with silver fasteners, and the newer versions that are from 2017 to present, most of those bolts were black, maybe a black oxide finish. So that's a big difference. So looking at how these cranks work and the spindles, we have this basically butts up and locks in against the end here, and this is where your power disc would go on the end of and just lay right on that hat. So it's already preset. It's kind of makes it completely idiot proof, if you will. This is left hand thread, and this gets screwed on. We're just gonna thread that on there, and there's a lock ring, and then the lock nut, which is also left hand thread. And basically that sandwiches your bottom bracket and your bearings. And here's the bearings. They are unique to this design. Even though they have a standard number on them, the ID of these bearings is 26 millimeter, while the OD's 47 millimeter. So it's very different than if you just went out and bought them. You would find that they don't exactly fit. The IDs are a lot opened. They're larger for this particular design. So the spindle bolts, as you see, are completely different. They're solid. They use an M6 Allen wrench to engage. This is an M10 thread. And of course, the newer versions use an M8 Allen wrench, and these are M14 thread. So much bigger, completely different idea. So looking at all this stuff, I find it very hard to believe that they get mixed up, but they do. A lot of people think that when they're buying these new cranks and they come in that fancy yellow box, that they're identical to the originals, and they're not. They just happen to have a similar appearance, and there's nothing wrong with using them for your builds. I'm not saying anything against that. I'm just saying that a lot of people are confusing them. I see people buying spindle bolts, especially since I offer these, and they're trying to fit them in the spindle of the new crank, and of course it doesn't work. So that's a problem. And, you know, as you can see, oh, got it on an angle there. This is designed specifically for this size. So, yeah, it's different. So, what are we doing with bearings? Well, bearings on the new Reproduction stuff, it's all either American made, Euro, or Spanish. They're not included with the cranks. You have to buy them separately. And so basically you just need to get 22 millimeter in whatever bottom bracket you have, because it'll work with pretty much any design. Now, the old cranks, the OGs, they pretty much are only American bottom bracket, and they do come with the Power Series cranks in the box. So that's a big difference there. But as you can see, the pinch bolts, if we use the one from the new crank, it will engage and it will thread in, but it's a lot smaller. But this is the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a lot larger. Anyway, going the opposite way, we can't put the new one. It won't engage because it's got a larger head, and this hole is not as big. So you're probably wondering, why did they do that? Well, there's some history behind these cranks. As strong as they look and they appear, there were some people who either left the pinch bolts loose and ended up rounding this square into a circle and having them basically not function, or they over tightened the pinch bolts to the point where this would crack under pressure from riding or ramp riding. I personally never experienced any of this, but I've heard some of these horror stories. So in the new design, I guess they thought, well, you know, if we can increase the material there, make these bolts a little bit smaller and keep this width, you know, keep more material in between, it should be a lot stronger. I don't know exactly what the thoughts were. It's just what I'm thinking. And again, these are threaded on both sides. So you'll notice that when you get the arms, they will have threaded holes on both of the arms. That's a good indication that you have Reproduction cranks, not the originals. And of course, these are all stamped 175 or 180 or 150 millimeter, again with the SR logo. They're made in Japan, and of course the year and the month. None of these Reproduction cranks have that information. So that's another clue. All right, just a real quick tip here. When you are assembling these cranks, they do require a bottom bracket spacer. Okay, and it's very critical if you're riding the bike that you install that spacer, and it has to go. Well, that one doesn't fit really well. It has to go basically there, in between your bearings, but you have to trim it specifically for the length of your bottom bracket. It's a little bit time consuming and requires some measuring, and when you cut it and you get it in there, it has to fit just perfectly. And the reason is, you certainly want to have these bearings supported when they're installed and they're basically getting force on them. So you want, you know, this tube to touch on the bearing ID of the race, not just basically sitting on this on the shield, or not touching it at all, because you can side load them and they will prematurely fail. Again, if you're building a Carpet Queen, it's not super necessary. You can probably leave it out. If you're going to ride, and you're going to ride a lot, it definitely needs to be in there. That's another controversial thing. I know that I have a 2018 26-inch GT Pro Performer, which I've taken the cranks apart a few times, and there's not a sleeve in there. So, whoops. But yeah, it needs to be there. Anyway, that about wraps it up. So if you guys have any questions or comments, leave them down, you know where. If you liked the video, hit the like button. If you subscribe, that would even be better. And I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you very much.